As you close your eyes, a soft glow fills the room, not from a lamp, but from peace itself. It spreads slowly, like morning sunlight wandering through sheer curtains, touching everything with kindness. You feel it rest on your skin, calm and weightless. The air hums with stillness, the kind that feels like a quiet promise that you are safe here, that the world has paused just for you. Breathe in gently. Let the air fill your chest like a wave that knows exactly where to go. And as you breathe out, feel the day slip away. Every worry, every name, every noise, fading like footprints in soft sand. Somewhere beyond the silence, a memory stirs. Of a time when nights were simple, when safety was a sound, not a wish. That sound is returning now. You are home. You are safe. And every breath you take is a lullaby. The rain had begun again. That soft, familiar drizzle that belonged only to Portland in October. It fell like a whisper on the cedar roofs, painting the evening in silver ripples. Every drop carried the scent of pine, soil, and distant ocean. For Mary Thompson, the sound wasn't sad. It was almost like a heartbeat, steady, forgiving, constant. She stepped out of the taxi and looked up at the boarding house. It wasn't much. 2 stories of weathered wood and ivy climbing along its sides. But to her, it was enough. After 30 years of marriage, and after watching her only son pack for college 2 months ago, enough was all she needed. The porch light flickered softly, a golden pool of warmth against the rain. She lifted her suitcase, its wheels clicking over the uneven boards, and paused at the door to listen. Somewhere inside, a clock ticked. Slow, old, dependable. She liked that sound too. Inside, the air was warmer than she expected, carrying traces of cinnamon, tea, and the faintest hint of old books. The landlady, Mrs. Ellerby, was kind enough, a woman with silver hair tied neatly in a bun and a voice that seemed to hum rather than speak. She handed Mary a key with the number 5 carved into its brass tag. "Your room's up the stairs, dear," she said, smiling. "Bathroom's at the end of the hall. Kitchen closes at 9, and if you need anything at all, just knock on my door." Mary thanked her softly, then began to climb the wooden staircase. Each step gave a low creak, as if the house were breathing beneath her feet. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender and rain-soaked wood. Pictures lined the walls. Faded photographs of the same street, taken long before the city's edges had filled with life. As she reached the top, she noticed it. The light. It glowed from under the door of room 6, across from hers. A warm, steady amber light, spilling gently across the floorboards. Every other door was closed and dark, yet that one shone like a lantern in fog. Mary paused, her hand resting on the rail. There was something oddly comforting about it, as though someone had left the light on just for her. The glow didn't blink or dim, it simply existed, humming with a soft stillness that seemed to warm the hallway itself. She smiled to herself. Maybe it was just another tenant who didn't like the dark. She could understand that. After months of sleeping in a half-empty house, she too had grown used to the company of small lights, kitchen lamps, radio screens, the hum of the refrigerator that never seemed to stop. Her room, number 5, was smaller than she imagined, but clean and gentle. A single window overlooked the street, where rain shimmered under the golden streetlights. She unpacked slowly, books, sweaters, a framed photo of her son in his graduation gown. She placed it on the nightstand beside a small ceramic lamp. Outside, thunder murmured far away, not angry, just distant, as if reminding her the world was still turning. She made herself a cup of tea in the shared kitchen downstairs, chamomile, her comfort of choice, and returned to her room. The hall was still dim except for that one light glowing under room 6. She found herself glancing at it again before entering her own door. It hadn't changed, hadn't flickered once. That night, as she lay in bed, the rain softened to a hush. The wooden beams above her sighed with the wind. Somewhere a floorboard creaked, perhaps from another tenant moving about. But what she noticed most was the faint light creeping beneath her own door, a reflection from across the hall. It wasn't intrusive, it was reassuring, almost like a nightlight in a child's room. The glow seemed to hum with life, a quiet rhythm, steady and calm, and for the first time in months, Mary felt no need to turn on her lamp or check her phone. She listened to the rain, breathed deeply, and drifted into sleep, with that warm, unblinking light outside room 6 keeping silent watch. Morning arrived softly, a thin veil of silver light brushing across the curtains. The rain had paused, leaving droplets trembling on the window like tiny beads of glass. Mary woke to the smell of brewed coffee and distant laughter echoing through the kitchen below. For the first time in what felt like years, she'd slept deeply. No restless turning, no hollow dreams. Just quiet. She blinked, stretched, and noticed it again. The golden glow still spilling faintly into the hallway from under room 6. Even in daylight it remained, soft but unwavering. Downstairs, Mrs. Ellerby, Helen, as she insisted Mary call her, was arranging a tray of freshly baked scones. The kitchen felt like stepping into a memory, wooden cabinets painted pale green, lace curtains swaying gently, an old radio whispering jazz from a bygone decade. "Morning, dear," Helen said warmly, eyes wrinkling behind her glasses. "You sleep all right?" "Better than I have in a long time," Mary replied, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "It's a lovely house, peaceful." Helen smiled, though there was something unreadable in her expression. "Peaceful, yes. She's an old house. Likes her quiet routines." Mary nodded, taking a seat near the window. Outside, the world looked washed clean. Cars moved slowly along wet pavement, and the maple trees had begun turning to copper and red. It felt safe, almost sacred, this kind of morning. As the tenants trickled in, a mix of quiet souls who offered polite smiles, conversation drifted easily. There was Henry, a retired schoolteacher with gentle eyes, Lila, a nurse who worked night shifts, and Thomas, who rarely spoke but always read in the corner. When Mary mentioned her room, Lila grinned knowingly. "Ah, you're next to the light," she said, half laughing. "The light?" Mary asked. Lila nodded toward the ceiling. "Room 6. That glow in the hallway? It's been on for as long as I've lived here. Nobody really notices it anymore." "Does someone stay there?" Mary pressed. "Not that I've seen," Henry murmured over his tea. "But Helen keeps it locked. Says it's storage." Helen's voice floated in from behind them, calm but firm. "Some things are better left undisturbed, Mr. Henry," she said, setting down a plate of butter. Then more softly to Mary, "The light doesn't bother anyone, dear. It's just part of the house." Mary smiled politely, though the curiosity lingered. She didn't sense menace in Helen's tone, only a strange tenderness, as though the light were something to be cared for, not questioned. That afternoon, Mary unpacked the last of her things, her worn journals, a box of letters, and a handful of books whose spines had faded from years of reading. She opened a fresh page in her leather-bound notebook and began to write. It felt good to write again. Her pen moved slowly, tracing words like footsteps through memory. She wrote about the rain, the smell of cinnamon from the kitchen, the creak of the stairs, and that steady golden light across the hall, a quiet companion in the dark. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the house slipped into its nightly rhythm. Doors shut softly, footsteps faded. The radio played one last sleepy tune before silence took over. Mary made herself a cup of tea and stood by her window, watching the fog gather over the rooftops. She thought of her son, his laughter, his stubborn kindness, and whispered a silent prayer for his safety. The ache of missing him still pulsed faintly, but here, in this strange little boarding house, the ache no longer felt sharp. It felt manageable. When she finally went to bed, the golden light was waiting, steady, unblinking. It painted a faint line across her floor, soft as a candle's breath. Lying there, Mary listened to the distant patter of rain beginning again, slower this time. Her eyes grew heavy. That warm, amber glow reached quietly through the gap beneath her door. A silent guardian. She could almost imagine it breathing with her, in rhythm, like an old friend watching over her sleep. And once again, she drifted off easily, the way children do, without effort, without fear, bathed in that strange, comforting light that never went out. The rain had grown heavier that night. Not the playful drizzle of the day, but a steady, thoughtful rhythm. It drummed on the roof like fingers tracing a lullaby. Mary sat in bed with her book, the lamplight warm on her face, the house hushed except for the sigh of wind through the gutters. It was nearly midnight when she closed the book and reached for the light switch. The golden glow from room 6 still leaked softly beneath the crack of her door, painting the hallway in honeyed tones. It had become part of her nights now, gentle, predictable, alive. But as she sank into her pillow, she heard it. A sound, faint, deliberate, like wood scraping against wood, a chair moving. She froze, listening. The noise came again, soft but distinct, from beyond the wall she shared with room 6. A second sound followed, a low, rhythmic hum, not mechanical, human. A voice, perhaps, humming the rise and fall of an old lullaby. Mary sat up slightly, holding her breath. It couldn't be someone living there, could it? Helen had said the room was storage, and besides, the hum carried something unusual. Not unfriendly, but old, as if it had been humming long before anyone came to listen. She tried to dismiss it. Just the wind, she whispered to herself. Old houses make old sounds. But when she leaned closer, when she listened, the sound stopped. Completely. The silence that followed was heavier than noise. Even the rain seemed to hesitate, as though the night itself was listening back. Mary waited, heart steady but awake. After a minute, she smiled quietly, shaking her head. Her imagination had always been too tender, too ready to weave meaning into the ordinary. Divorce, loneliness, they did that to the mind. She got up for a glass of water. The hallway met her like a dream, dim, soft, and steeped in that same golden light. It filled every corner gently, casting no harsh shadows. The door to room 6 stood closed, the light still glowing beneath it, patient and constant. Mary paused. The air felt different here. Not cold, but aware, as if the walls were holding their breath with her. She leaned slightly toward the door, listening. Nothing. Only her own breathing. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, a shift in the reflection across the hall. The old hallway mirror, framed in dark oak, caught her silhouette in its glass. She smiled faintly at herself, the kind of tired, amused smile one gives when caught being foolish. Then she turned to go. But her reflection didn't. It stayed for a heartbeat longer. Her head still tilted, her lips just beginning to curve. A delay so small, so human, it could have been her eyes playing tricks. Mary blinked, staring. The glass was still now. Quiet, innocent. She laughed softly, though her laughter felt thin in the empty hall. "Sleep, Mary," she murmured. "You're chasing shadows." She returned to her room, shutting the door gently behind her. The golden light still slipped underneath, unwavering. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded, watching the soft glow on her floorboards. Somehow, despite the odd stillness, it felt comforting again, like a watchful presence that meant no harm. She breathed in, slow and deliberate, and wrote a single line in her journal before lying down. Sometimes, the light feels like it's waiting for something. When she turned off her lamp, the glow from room 6 grew brighter, or perhaps the darkness just made it seem so. The hum did not return. The house exhaled, and Mary, after a long moment of stillness, surrendered once more to sleep, unaware that in the mirror across the hall, her reflection had not yet closed its eyes. Days in the boarding house began to fold over one another like pages in a well-loved book, quiet, measured, comforting in their sameness. Mary had always been a creature of habit, but now, in this new season of solitude, her rituals became her lifeline. At 9 every morning, she brewed chamomile tea in a chipped porcelain pot, the steam curling through the cool kitchen air like soft breath. By 10, the rain would usually arrive, steady, unhurried, painting the cedar shingles outside with a patient rhythm that only Portland could perfect. She would open the window just enough to let the scent of wet earth drift in. Sometimes she wrote, sometimes she read, and always there was music. The old jazz station Helen kept tuned on the radio, its signal fading in and out with the weather. The trumpet's mellow sighs filled the house like a memory trying not to be forgotten. Life, for a while, felt simple again. Helen would hum as she dusted the hallway pictures, Lila came and went with her night shift stories, and Henry told quiet jokes over breakfast about the rain's refusal to take a day off. Even the silence had a softness to it, the kind that didn't weigh on you, but held you gently, like a wool blanket. Except for room 6. That light, the one that had become her strange glowing companion, still burned every night, and now, every so often, she could hear faint noises behind the door. At first, she thought she imagined them. A quiet shuffle, like slippers moving across the floor, the whisper of pages being turned, and always that same gentle hum, low and steady, threading itself through the silence like a heartbeat behind the wall. She found that she didn't mind. It was oddly comforting, as though someone were awake with her, keeping her company in those long, sleepless moments before dawn. Sometimes, she even whispered a goodnight toward the wall before turning off her lamp. One rainy afternoon, she mentioned it casually to Helen over tea. "I keep hearing something from room 6, Mary said, stirring honey into her cup. "It's faint. Maybe a draft or, I don't know, pages turning perhaps, like someone reading." Helen didn't look up right away. She poured her tea slowly, hands steady, face thoughtful. "Old houses make all kinds of noises," she said finally. "The walls remember more than we do. That's what my mother used to say." There was warmth in her tone, but also something evasive, a gentleness that avoided questions rather than answering them. "I hope it's not a bother," Helen added after a pause. "That light's never caused any harm." "Oh no," Mary said quickly. It's actually kind of nice. I don't feel so alone at night." Helen smiled faintly, though her eyes drifted toward the window where the rain had begun to fall harder. "Loneliness is a tricky thing, dear. Sometimes it fills the room before we even notice." Mary didn't ask more. She understood what Helen meant. After all, she'd spent months drowning in her own silence before coming here. But now, something about this house, this glow, gave her the illusion of presence, a quiet reassurance that she wasn't entirely forgotten by the world. That evening, Mary resumed her ritual, tea at 9, rain at 10, soft jazz until the static became part of the melody. The light from room 6 spilled into the hallway again, serene and unbroken. She sat by her window, journal open, pen moving lazily. "The light feels different tonight," she wrote. "Brighter, or maybe warmer. It's strange, but sometimes I think it listens when I breathe." The rain shifted to a whisper. The house sighed. From behind the door of room 6 came that soft, steady humming once more, a tune she almost recognized this time, though the words were lost to her. Mary closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. Her heart slowed, her breathing deepened, and though she could not have said why, she whispered almost unconsciously, "Good night." From behind the wall came the faintest reply, or perhaps just the echo of her own voice, a quiet hum, perfectly in time with the rain. The morning came softly, with the rain whispering against the old cedar roof. Mary stirred awake to the faint aroma of chamomile and cedarwood, her nightly ritual still clinging to the air. But something new lay beneath her door. A small, neatly folded piece of paper, cream-colored and delicate, as though it had been waiting there all night. She hesitated before picking it up, Her fingers brushed the edge of the note, slightly damp from the mist seeping through the hallway cracks. Unfolding it, she found the words written in a looping, graceful hand, deliberate, patient strokes of ink that carried warmth. "You don't have to be alone tonight." Her first reaction wasn't fear. It was stillness, a strange quiet, as if the whole house was holding its breath with her. Mary read it again. The handwriting reminded her of her mother's letters from decades ago. Old-fashioned, tender, confident. She smiled despite herself, thinking maybe Mrs. Helen, the kind but peculiar landlord, had left it as a gesture. Maybe she'd noticed Mary's loneliness seeping through her walls at night. But when she went downstairs to return the note, Mrs. Helen stood in the kitchen by the window, pouring tea with her usual serene precision. "Oh, my dear," Helen said, glancing up with eyes like rainwater. "You look pale. Didn't sleep well?" Mary hesitated, then showed her the note. For the first time since Mary had moved in, Mrs. Helen's expression faltered. Her hands stilled midair. "Where did you find this?" "It was under my door this morning. I thought maybe you—" "No." The word came quickly, sharp as a whisper cut in half. Then, softening, Helen set down the teapot. "No one lives in room 6. It's been locked for years." Mary frowned. "But the light's always on." "Yes," Helen said quietly, folding her trembling hands. "And it must stay that way." The conversation ended there, with Helen's gaze fixed on the window, not at Mary, but at the reflection of the upstairs hallway, where the golden light still glowed faintly through the rain. That night, Mary sat on her bed with the note in her lap. The ink shimmered faintly in the lamplight, as if alive. She tried to reason with herself, maybe a prank, maybe one of the tenants trying to be friendly. But something about the phrasing struck a deeper chord. "You don't have to be alone tonight." It wasn't an offer. It felt like an invitation. She tucked the note beneath her pillow before turning off the lamp. The golden light outside her door spilled in thinly through the gap beneath it, painting her room with its steady warmth. She closed her eyes. The house creaked softly, wood sighing under the weight of the rain. Then, a hum. Low, soft, familiar. The same tune she'd heard before, faintly behind room 6's door. Mary didn't move. Her heart beat slow, heavy, but not in fear. In recognition. The melody. She knew it. It was the lullaby her mother used to hum when she was a child, when thunder frightened her to tears. Tears welled in her eyes now, uninvited, tender. She whispered into the dark, barely breathing, "Thank you." The hum stopped, and from the hallway, just beyond the glow, came the soft sound of a chair scraping against wood, the same sound as before. Only this time, it was followed by the faintest reply, a whisper that wasn't menacing, but fragile, almost human. A voice carried on the edge of breath. "You're welcome." Mary didn't scream, she didn't move. Instead, she turned her face into her pillow and let the warmth of that unseen presence, gentle, ancient, impossible, cradle her into sleep. For the first time in years, she didn't dream of loss, only of light. That night, Mary drifted into sleep as the rain softened to a whisper against the roof. The golden glow from room 6 filtered gently through the crack under her door, painting the room in a soft amber hue. Warm, steady, alive. In her dream, she found herself in a familiar place, though she couldn't name it. A small classroom, perhaps. The kind that smelled faintly of chalk and old paper. The air shimmered with that same golden light, spilling from a single lamp on a wooden desk. A woman sat there, her back turned to Mary. She was grading papers in slow, deliberate strokes, her pen gliding across the page with elegant precision. There was something soothing about the rhythm, the faint scratch of the nib, the quiet rustle of parchment, the hum under her breath. Mary took a step closer. The woman's movements were graceful, patient, and yet, achingly familiar. The way she tilted her head, the curve of her shoulders, the way her hair fell slightly out of its bun. "Excuse me," Mary said softly, unsure if she should speak. The woman paused mid-mark. Slowly, she turned. Mary froze. It was her own face, not as it looked now, but younger, untouched by time or grief. Her reflection, yet not. The woman smiled faintly, eyes kind and steady. "You came back," the younger Mary said. Mary's throat tightened. "Back from where?" The woman only smiled again, her pen glinting in the golden light. "It doesn't matter. You found the note, didn't you?" Before Mary could respond, the woman gestured to the papers on the desk. Each page was filled with the same looping handwriting. Elegant, precise. The same words repeated over and over, line after line. "You don't have to be alone tonight." Mary reached out to touch one of the papers. It was warm beneath her fingertips, as though the ink itself was alive. The woman, her younger self, looked up at her once more. "It's all right," she whispered. "The light remembers." The glow around her brightened, pulsing softly, like a heartbeat. Then, silence. Mary gasped awake. Her room was quiet, except for the steady patter of rain. The clock read 3:12 a.m. She sat up slowly, her heart pounding. The light outside her door still glowed, unwavering, golden, gentle. She rubbed her eyes, trying to steady her breath. It had only been a dream, she told herself. Only a dream. But then she noticed something. On her desk, the cup of tea she'd left untouched before bed, cold when she'd set it down, was steaming, freshly made. She stared at it, stunned. The faint scent of chamomile filled the air. A thin curl of steam rose toward the ceiling, twisting in the light like a whisper made visible. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the cup. The warmth was real. The tea was real. And then, she saw it. Beside the cup, on her open journal, lay the note from the night before. Only now, it wasn't folded. It was flat, open, and written again. The same message, in the same delicate cursive. "You don't have to be alone tonight." But beneath it, a new line had appeared. "You wrote this once, remember?" Her breath caught. She stared at the handwriting, each loop, each stroke, and her pulse quickened. She knew that hand. The small upward flick at the end of every Y, the tiny flourish on the T. It wasn't someone else's. It was hers. Exactly hers. She backed away from the desk slowly, her mind reeling. She grabbed her old journal, flipping through past pages. Notes, reflections, letters to herself. The same looping handwriting, the same graceful flow. Her throat tightened. She pressed her palm against the paper, feeling the faint tremor of her heartbeat through it. Somewhere beyond her door, the house sighed. A board settling, a quiet exhale through the walls. And then she noticed it. Faintly, just above the sound of the rain, a whisper. Her own voice, repeating the words she had once written to herself. "You don't have to be alone tonight." The light outside room 6 flickered for the first time. Once. Twice. Then steadied again, as if it had simply blinked or breathed. Mary stood frozen in the middle of the room, the note trembling in her hand, her reflection in the darkened window faintly visible. She wasn't sure anymore whether the light was watching her or remembering her. The morning rain had stopped by the time Mary came downstairs. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and damp wood, and the light from the front windows spilled across the narrow hallway in soft golden bands. Mrs. Helen was already seated at the kitchen table, her small frame tucked into an oversized sweater, steam rising from her teacup. "Sleep all right?" the old woman asked without looking up. Mary hesitated before answering. "Mostly," she said. "It's quieter here than I expected." Helen chuckled softly. "Quiet's what most people come here for." She stirred her tea, the spoon clinking lightly against the china. "Quiet's what keeps us sane." Mary smiled faintly, but something in Helen's tone felt heavier than her words. They sat together for a few moments in companionable silence, the sound of rainwater dripping from the eaves filling the pauses between sips. Mary felt the question bubbling inside her, the one she'd avoided since she moved in. Finally, she set her cup down and asked, "Mrs. Helen, that light outside room 6, does it ever go off?" Helen's hand froze mid-stir. For a second, the only sound was the faint tick of the wall clock. "No," Helen said finally, her voice low and even. "It never has." Mary tilted her head. "Never? Not even during storms or outages?" The old woman's eyes flickered up to meet hers, soft but steady. "Not once. Not in 20 years." Mary waited, sensing there was more. Helen sighed, resting her spoon beside the cup. "That room. It used to belong to Miss Ruth Carver. She was a teacher, a good one. The kind who'd bring soup to her sick students and stay after class to help the ones who couldn't keep up." Mary leaned forward. "What happened to her?" Helen looked out the window, her gaze distant. "She moved in around 1989 when this house was still new to me. Rented that very room upstairs. Said it was perfect for her. Quiet, bright, close to the schools. Every night after supper, she'd light that lamp and work at her desk, tutoring children whose parents couldn't afford lessons. She believed no one should be left behind just because they were born poor." Mary could almost picture it. A gentle woman with tired eyes, bending over papers under that same golden glow. Helen continued, her voice softening. "Ruth had this old bulb she loved. Said the light felt alive somehow, like it could listen. She'd keep it burning late into the night. I'd sometimes knock and remind her to rest. She'd smile and say, 'One more page, Helen. Just one more child to help.'" She took a slow breath, the steam from her tea fogging her glasses slightly. "Then, one night, I went up to check on her. The clock had just struck midnight. The door was closed, but I could see the light under it, the same way you can now. I called her name. No answer. I thought she'd fallen asleep at her desk again." Helen paused. The rhythm of her words faltered, like the tremor of an old memory resurfacing. "When I opened the door, she was sitting upright, papers spread all around her, pen still in her hand. Peaceful, like she'd just stopped mid-thought." Mary felt a chill run through her, though the kitchen was warm. "She died there?" Helen nodded. "Heart failure," the doctor said. "Quick and quiet. Like her light just went out." The old woman's eyes turned toward the ceiling, toward the room above them. "But here's the thing," she said in a near whisper. "When they took her body away and I went to turn off the lamp, it wouldn't go dark. I switched it off, unplugged it, even replaced the bulb. Didn't matter. Every time it came back on." She gave a faint, almost resigned smile. "After a while, I stopped trying. Maybe it was her way of staying close to the children she loved. Maybe she just didn't want to leave this world entirely." Mary stared into her tea, the reflection of the kitchen light rippling with each heartbeat. "And no one else has lived in that room since?" Helen shook her head. "A few tried. Didn't last. Said they felt watched. Not in a cruel way, but gently, like someone waiting to be remembered." The clock ticked again, steady as breathing. Mary swallowed hard. "Do you ever talk to her?" Helen's smile returned, sad but serene. "Sometimes when the nights are long. I tell her about the world she left behind, about how her students grew up, had families of their own. And every now and then, when I finish, that light flickers, just once. Like she's saying, 'I remember.'" Outside, the wind moved through the cedar trees, carrying the faint scent of rain and time. Mary sat very still, her heart both heavy and strangely comforted. The image of Miss Ruth, gentle, devoted, forever framed in golden light, lingered behind her eyes. And for the first time, she wondered whether the glow outside her door was not just a haunting, but a heartbeat that never stopped caring. The next evening, Mary stood in the hallway outside room 6, the light humming softly above her. It glowed with that same steady warmth Helen had described. Not bright, not harsh, but alive. She hesitated for a moment, holding a small porcelain cup in both hands. Steam drifted upward, carrying the faint scent of chamomile and honey. It felt strange, maybe even foolish, but something in her heart urged her forward. "Good evening, Miss Ruth," she whispered softly, setting the cup gently on the floor before the closed door. "You worked so hard for everyone else. Maybe someone should make tea for you." The old floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she turned to go. For a moment, she thought she heard a faint rustle from behind the door, like papers being shifted, a pen sliding off a desk. But when she looked back, the hallway was still. It was only that soft, unwavering glow remained. The next morning, the cup was empty. Not tipped, not broken, just clean and dry, placed neatly by the wall. Mary smiled faintly, though she didn't fully understand why. It was the first time in months she'd woken without that heavy weight in her chest. That night, she placed another small offering outside room 6, an old paperback she'd once loved, its pages worn from years of rereading. A collection of short poems, gentle, nostalgic, filled with grace. She wrote a note on the inside cover. "For when the nights feel too long." The following morning, the book was gone. In its place, a single candy, wrapped neatly in red foil. Mary laughed softly when she saw it. It was the kind of candy teachers used to hand out to children. A small, simple sweetness. She unwrapped it, placed it on her tongue, and felt the sugar melt slowly, leaving behind a taste she hadn't known she missed. That day, she cleaned her room, humming quietly as rain tapped against the window. She dusted her desk, rearranged her few books, even opened her curtains to let in the gray light. For the first time, the stillness didn't feel like emptiness. It felt full. The next evening, she brought a new gift, a single white carnation in a glass jar. She set it carefully outside room 6, right beneath the glowing bulb. "For you," she said, smiling softly, "for kindness that doesn't fade." She went to bed with her curtains open, letting the golden light spill across her blanket. Sleep came quickly, like a tide. And in her dream, she was back in that glowing room again. The desk, the papers, the faint scent of chalk and lavender. Miss Ruth sat in her chair, head bowed slightly, her face calm. When she looked up, she smiled. "Thank you," she said simply. When Mary woke, the room was filled with soft morning light. The air smelled faintly of flowers and old paper. She walked to her door, half expecting to find the jar still there. It wasn't. Instead, on the floor before her door lay a small piece of folded paper. She knelt, hands trembling slightly, and opened it. Inside was a child's drawing, crayon on notebook paper, the lines clumsy but full of joy. A woman with glasses stood beside a small group of smiling children. Above them, a yellow sun beamed, and next to it, in shaky handwriting, "Thank you, Miss Ruth." Mary's eyes stung. She traced the lines with her fingertip, smiling through the blur of tears. Something inside her heart, a place long quiet and hollow, began to warm again. That night, she brewed 2 cups of tea instead of 1. She sat by her window, the golden light spilling across her hands, the rain whispering softly beyond the glass. Her insomnia, the restlessness that had haunted her for months, was gone. In its place was a sense of gentle presence, as if someone, somewhere, was keeping her company in silence. And when she finally drifted to sleep, she dreamed of chalk dust floating through sunlight, and the echo of a voice saying tenderly, "You're not alone, Mary. You never were." The storm rolled in just after midnight, a deep, rumbling growl that pressed against the windows and shook the old boarding house to its bones. The rain came down in steady sheets, tapping against the glass like fingertips. Mary lay in bed, half awake, listening to the rhythm of the storm. Normally, she loved nights like this. The rain always felt like company, gentle, endless, familiar. But tonight, there was something different about it. Something alive beneath the noise. Lightning flashed, painting the walls in white for a heartbeat, then fading back into gold as the light outside room 6 burned steadily on. Even the thunder seemed to keep a respectful distance from that glow. Mary turned on her side, pulling the blanket closer. "It's just a storm," she whispered to herself. Nothing more. But then she heard it. Faint, almost hidden beneath the whispering rain. A voice. Soft, breathy, unmistakably human. "Mary." She froze. Her pulse quickened, her breath caught halfway in her throat. She strained to listen. "Mary, thank you." It wasn't the wind. The sound had weight, warmth, a nearness that brushed against the edges of her consciousness. She sat up, her eyes darting toward the door, toward the light seeping through the bottom crack. The storm roared again, thunder rolling through the sky like a warning. Another whisper, closer now. "Mary." She swallowed hard, clutching the blanket. "Miss Ruth?" Her voice trembled as she said the name, half hopeful, half afraid. "Is that you?" The silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. Then, another sound, soft as breath, from behind her. Inside the room. Mary turned slowly. Lightning flashed again, illuminating every familiar shape. Her dresser, her books, the little clock ticking softly by her bedside. Everything exactly as it should be. And yet, the air felt occupied. She could smell something faint, like old paper and lavender, the same scent she'd noticed after finding the drawing. "Mary," the voice whispered again, but this time it was not outside, not through the wall. It was right beside her ear. Her breath hitched. She turned sharply and found no one there. Just the faint shimmer of golden light reflected in her mirror, flickering like candlelight. For a long, suspended moment, she stared into her own reflection. Pale face, trembling hands, eyes wide. And then she saw it. A shadow standing just behind her, soft and indistinct, like the outline of a woman bathed in warm light. Lightning flashed once more, and the shadow was gone. Mary pressed a hand to her chest, her heartbeat loud and wild. But beneath the fear, there was something else. A strange calm, almost gratitude. The whisper hadn't felt threatening. It had felt grateful, gentle, human. Gentle. She turned toward the window, where rain streaked the glass like tears. The golden light still glowed faintly through the storm, unbothered, eternal. "Miss Ruth?" she whispered softly, her voice barely audible over the rain. "You're welcome." As she lay back down, the thunder softened, rolling farther into the distance. The light from room 6 seemed to pulse once, faintly, as though acknowledging her. Mary closed her eyes. The fear settled into something quieter, a strange, fragile peace. And somewhere between the thunder and the rain, she thought she heard one last whisper, fading into her dreams. "You kept the light alive." It was one of those rainless nights that Portland sometimes offered after days of drizzle. The air washed clean, the streets glistening faintly under amber lamplight. The scent of wet cedar still lingered, and the sky hung low with the promise of another storm. Mary sat by her window, her chin resting on the back of her hand. The world outside was wrapped in stillness, save for the occasional rustle of wind through the maple trees. The golden light outside room 6 glowed steadily, the only thing breaking the darkness along the narrow hall visible through the open curtains. She hadn't meant to stay up this late. Her tea had gone cold. Her journal lay half-filled with a few meandering thoughts about gratitude, time, and the strange peace that had returned to her life. And yet, she couldn't look away from that light. It felt less like she was watching it, and more like it was watching with her, a companion in quiet. Sometime after midnight, the stillness broke. A faint flicker, a tremor of motion against the golden glow. For a heartbeat, Mary thought it was a trick of her eyes. or maybe a car passing down the distant street. But no, it was inside the house. Someone, something, had passed in front of room 6's window. Mary leaned closer to the glass, her breath fogging a small circle. The figure was there again, clearer now, the silhouette of a woman, seated, her back slightly hunched as though reading. The shape was unmistakable. A gentle slope of shoulders, a narrow neck, the soft outline of a bun pinned neatly atop her head. It was Miss Ruth. Mary's heart didn't race the way she expected it to. There was no terror, only a deep ache in her chest, like nostalgia for someone she'd never truly met. She watched as the figure raised one arm, slowly, deliberately, the gesture of turning a page. The shadow's movement cast faint ripples across the golden light, as though time itself had exhaled. Mary smiled. A quiet, knowing smile. "Good night, Ruth," she whispered. The woman's head turned slightly, just enough to suggest acknowledgement, though her face remained lost in silhouette. For a few long seconds, Mary sat in reverent silence, her eyes damp with something between awe and tenderness. The boarding house seemed to breathe with her, floorboards expanding and contracting softly in the night's coolness. Then, as gently as it had appeared, the shadow faded. The light steadied, full and warm again, but empty. Mary leaned back, exhaling slowly, her fingers trembling around the porcelain cup she hadn't realized she'd picked up again. A thought came to her, unbidden, quiet. Perhaps Miss Ruth wasn't haunting this place. Perhaps she was protecting it. The golden light wasn't a warning. It was a vigil, a promise kept. Mary looked toward the hallway one last time before pulling her curtains halfway shut. The glow still filtered through, softer now, as though it knew she was going to sleep. She climbed into bed, letting the faint hum of the old light fill the silence. Her body relaxed, her breath deepened, her eyes drifted shut. Somewhere between waking and dreaming, she thought she felt the faintest brush. The air shifting beside her pillow, the light touching her cheek like a hand smoothing a child's hair. And just before sleep claimed her completely, Mary heard, or imagined, a soft, familiar voice from down the hall, calm and full of warmth. "Good night, Mary." The light outside room 6 flickered once, like the blink of an old soul. Then it glowed steady again, patient and eternal, as the house settled into its quiet breathing. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the world outside still felt soaked, as if the sky hadn't decided whether to let go or hold on. Mary sat in her armchair by the window, the radio whispering an old jazz tune. Across the courtyard, room 6 glowed softly, steady as ever. That light had become her lullaby, her companion, her silent friend in the long hours when the city slept. She drifted somewhere between wakefulness and dream when it happened. A sound so soft, so deliberate, it froze her heartbeat mid-beat. Knock, 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 3 gentle taps. Slow, almost polite. Mary's eyes flicked to the door. Her clock read 2:07 a.m. The sound wasn't a hallucination of half-sleep. It had weight, a presence that filled the silence like a pulse. She rose carefully, not wanting to make a sound. Her bare feet made no noise against the wooden floor. "Mrs. Helen?" she whispered. Nothing. Only the ticking of her clock and the soft hum of the hallway light filtering under the door. Knock. This time, the sound didn't come from the hallway. It came from the other side. Close. Intimate. Like someone leaning against the door with their ear pressed to it. Mary's fingers trembled as she reached for the knob. She hesitated. Every story, Mrs. Helen had told about Miss Ruth swirled through her mind. The night classes, the laughter of unseen children, the light that refused to die. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe it wasn't. She opened the door. The hallway stretched out, empty. The air shimmered faintly, the way heat does above summer asphalt. The familiar golden light bathed everything in a gentle glow. But no footsteps, no voices, no figures, just stillness. Then, a scent drifted past her. Faint, nostalgic, human. lavender soap, chalk dust, the faint sweetness of paper ink. It wasn't random. It was a memory. Mary stepped out, heart racing. The light from room 6 flickered for the first time since she'd moved in. Just once, like a blink. She almost called out Ruth, but stopped herself. The quiet felt sacred. When she returned to her room, she saw it. On her desk lay a piece of paper, placed perfectly square in the center, where her journal usually sat. A school report card, yellowed with age, edges curled slightly as if handled too many times. Across the top, neat cursive letters spelled Mary Evans, grade A+. Her breath caught. The handwriting. It was the same looping script as the note she'd received days ago. You don't have to be alone tonight. She ran her fingertips over the page. The ink shimmered faintly under the lamplight. Not wet, not dry, something in between. She felt warmth, as if the paper had just been held by living hands. Her eyes filled. For months, she'd felt unseen, unacknowledged. The world had moved on without her, like a book everyone had finished reading. Yet here, in this quiet, haunted building, someone, or something, had noticed her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "For this." Outside, the golden light pulsed once more, brighter than before, then dimmed to its usual calm glow, as though the building itself had exhaled. Mary pressed the report card to her chest. For the first time, the thought didn't terrify her. Maybe she wasn't the only one trying to be remembered. Maybe Miss Ruth, too, just wanted someone to say goodnight. The storm rolled in without warning. No thunder, no lightning, just a deep, shifting darkness that swallowed the city, one block at a time. At first, Mary didn't notice. She was reading by her small desk lamp, her radio humming softly in the background, when the world suddenly exhaled, and everything went still. The radio went silent. The lamp dimmed, then blinked out. Even the hum of the refrigerator faded into nothing. For a few long seconds, there was only her heartbeat. Then she noticed it. That golden glow bleeding through the cracks of her curtains, unwavering. Room 6 was still lit. Mary rose from her chair, her pulse quickening. She walked to the window, peering through the thin lace curtains. Across the courtyard, every apartment was dark, except for that one. Its light shone softly against the rain-slick bricks, steady as ever, like a lantern guiding her through an ocean of shadows. Moments later, a knock came at her door, hurried, nervous. "Mary, you awake?" It was Mr. Dalton from room 3, his voice hushed but strained. Behind him stood two more tenants, young Ellie from room 2 and old Mrs. Klein, clutching her robe tight around her. They all looked pale, their faces washed in candlelight. "The power's out all over the block," Dalton said. "But that room..." He pointed down the hall. The faint golden light was spilling beneath the door of room 6, flickering just slightly, like a living thing. It's been like that for years, but never during an outage. Mrs. Klein crossed herself. "It ain't right," she whispered. "Helen told us the bulb was wired separate, but..." "She told me no one's lived there in decades," Mary interrupted softly. Ellie's candle trembled in her hand. "Then who turned the light on?" The hallway seemed to breathe around them, wood creaking, wind sighing through the old vents. Somewhere, deep in the building, a pipe groaned like an echo from another time. Mary felt it again. The gentle pull toward room 6. That same pull she'd felt since the first night she'd seen the light. The same quiet curiosity that had once comforted her and now filled her with unease. "I'll check," she said before she could stop herself. The others stared at her, wide-eyed. "Mary, don't," Mrs. Klein warned. "Let Helen handle it in the morning." But Helen wasn't home tonight. She'd gone to visit her sister. Mary picked up a flashlight from her table, though she barely needed it. The glow from room 6 painted the hallway in a strange, honey-colored haze. As she approached the door, the air grew warmer. Not hot, but softly radiant, like sunlight through a curtain. She reached out, fingers trembling, and placed her palm against the wood. It was warm. Not the dry heat of electricity, but the kind of warmth that comes from skin, from life. She drew her hand back, staring. "It's alive," she murmured without thinking. Behind her, Dalton whispered, "Mary, step away." But she didn't move. She leaned closer, listening. There it was again, faint, rhythmic, like pages turning. Then a soft hum, almost like someone breathing through the wall. Her flashlight flickered. Once, twice, then died completely. Yet she could still see perfectly. The light from under the door pulsed, syncing with her heartbeat. For one breathless moment, she thought she heard a voice, just beyond the wood. Low, kind, familiar. "Don't be afraid, Mary." The words were almost inaudible, carried on the faint hum of that eternal light. Her lips parted, her mind dizzy with fear and something else. Recognition. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the warmth faded. The glow dimmed, sputtered once like a candle in the wind, and went still. The power returned with a sudden electric snap. Lamps blinked to life. Radios buzzed. Somewhere, a kettle whistled to a boil. But room 6 stayed dark. Mary stood there, her palm still tingling where it had touched the door. And for the first time since she'd arrived, the light that had always comforted her was gone. Morning arrived gray and trembling, rain crawling down the window in slow, uneven rivulets. Portland's autumn chill crept in quietly, soft and damp, the kind that made the whole world seem half asleep. Mary stirred from bed, still heavy with dreams she couldn't recall. Her breath misted in the cool air. She rubbed her eyes, blinked toward the window, and froze. There, drawn into the thin layer of fog on the glass, were 3 words, etched by a finger she hadn't lifted. "She needs you." Mary's stomach turned. The letters glistened faintly in the pale morning light, perfect and deliberate. The handwriting, looping, gentle, felt familiar. She whispered to herself, "Ruth?" Her first instinct was to wipe it away, but something in her chest stopped her. Instead, she pressed her fingers against the cold glass, tracing the words like a prayer. The room was quiet. Too quiet. No rain tapping the window pane now, no pipes groaning. Even the sound of the street had dimmed, as if the world were holding its breath. Then she noticed the light. Through the crack at the bottom of her door, a soft, golden hue spilled in. The unmistakable color of the room 6 light. But that couldn't be right. The bulb had gone dark last night for the first time in decades. Mary's pulse quickened. She reached for her robe, her slippers, her courage. The hallway beyond her door was awash in that familiar amber glow. Warm, gentle, alive. It wasn't electric light. It moved. It shimmered faintly, like candlelight trapped inside honey. Dust motes drifted through it, glowing like fireflies. The door to room 6 was open. Mary hesitated at the threshold, her hand trembling. "Ruth?" she whispered. Her voice barely carried through the air. It's Mary." No answer. Only the faint creak of an old wooden chair. She stepped inside. The scent hit her first. Lavender and old paper, chalk dust and something faintly floral, like carnations long since dried. The room was exactly as Helen had described it. Simple, lived in, almost tender. A single bed, neatly made. A bookshelf lined with worn novels and old lesson plans, and in the corner, beside the glowing lamp, a small oak desk. On the desk lay an envelope, unsealed. Inside, a half-finished letter written in that same looping hand. "To the one who keeps the light, if you can read this, it means I am still waiting. There are children who never learn to say goodbye." The rest trailed off mid-sentence. Beside it, a fountain pen rested at an angle, the nib glistening as if freshly dipped. A cup of tea steamed faintly beside it. And that was when Mary realized the steam was real. The teacup trembled slightly on its saucer, and then she saw it. The chair by the desk was rocking, slow, steady, forward and back, forward and back. Her breath caught. She couldn't see anyone sitting in it, but the impression was unmistakable, as though someone had just stood up or never really left at all. The golden light pulsed once, as if acknowledging her. And in that instant, Mary understood the message on the glass. She needs you. This wasn't about fear. It wasn't even about haunting. It was a calling. Mary took a step forward, her voice trembling but sure. Ruth, if you can hear me, I'm here. You don't have to wait alone anymore. The rocking chair slowed, stopped. Then, ever so softly, the desk lamp flickered. A brief, gentle dimming. And in that moment of half-darkness, Mary thought she saw the outline of a woman standing beside the desk. A faint silhouette. Kind eyes, hair pulled back, a shawl over her shoulders. The glow brightened once more, steady, serene. And just like that, the room was still again. Only the faint scent of lavender lingered. And the letter, waiting to be finished. The next evening came quietly, as if the house itself wished not to disturb the moment. Rain murmured against the eaves, soft and steady. Mary sat at the small desk in room 6, the amber lamp casting its usual golden warmth across the paper she had found. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the letter again. The ink shimmered faintly, though she hadn't opened an inkwell. The words were written in that same looping, gentle script. A teacher's handwriting, patient and careful. To the next woman who feels forgotten, if you are reading this, it means the house still listens. It means the light still remembers. There will be nights when the silence feels heavier than the world, when you wonder if anyone will ever truly see you again. I hope when that happens, you will do what I did. Leave the light on. Let it tell you stories. Let it be proof that kindness doesn't fade, even when no one is there to witness it. Mary paused, her eyes blurring. The words reached through her like the sound of a lullaby half remembered from childhood. Her throat tightened. Tears threatened. The light is not a warning, the letter continued. It's an invitation. For every woman who has waited too long for someone to return. For every heart that forgot how to rest. You are not invisible. You are the keeper now. Her breath caught. The final line was signed simply, in a graceful flourish. Mary Thompson. Mary stared at it, the room spinning softly around her. That was her name, her own signature, perfectly written in the shape she'd used all her life, even the same subtle loop in the M. She looked down at her hands. Ink smudged the edge of her right thumb. Her heart fluttered, not in terror but recognition. She had written this. Or she would. The edges of the letter rippled gently, as though stirred by a breath that wasn't hers. She could almost hear Ruth's voice behind her, calm, reassuring, like a teacher reading aloud. You were never alone, Mary. You were meant to finish the story. Mary lifted the fountain pen. Its nib gleamed softly under the golden light, waiting. She added one final line beneath the signature, her hand moving as if guided by memory itself. And when your time comes, leave the light burning. Someone will need it. The lamp flickered once, not a warning, but a nod, then settled into a steady, peaceful glow. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. Mary folded the letter carefully and placed it back on the desk, her fingers lingering on its edges. The air around her felt lighter now, full of quiet understanding. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like a tenant or a stranger in someone else's story. She was part of it, the next keeper of a gentle legacy built from loneliness, compassion, and peace. As she turned off her own bedside light later that night, the one outside room 6 shone a little brighter. its golden halo spilling into the hall like the warmth of a held hand. And Mary smiled in her sleep, dreaming of chalk dust and lavender and the calm presence of someone who had never really left. The storm came without warning. One moment, Portland's evening was all drizzle and soft light. The next, thunder rolled over the hills like a living creature, shaking windows and bending trees. The air turned electric, alive. Rain lashed against the old cedar shingles of the boarding house, drumming out a rhythm that was too loud to ignore. Mary stood by her window, her palms pressed to the cool glass. Outside, the sky burned in pulses of white fire, splitting the darkness open again and again. Each flash revealed a brief, trembling glimpse of the street below. Gutters overflowing, the maple tree twisting in the wind. She'd weathered dozens of storms in her life, but this one felt different. The house itself seemed to tense with each thunderclap, as if bracing for something it had been expecting for years. Then she heard it. At first, just a murmur beneath the rain, faint, rhythmic. Children's laughter. Mary frowned, leaning closer to the window. That couldn't be right. It was nearly midnight, the street deserted. Yet through the deluge came the unmistakable sound of giggling, light, joyful, echoing faintly like it was carried on memory rather than air. "Hello?" she whispered, though she didn't expect an answer. The wind howled in reply, rattling her window pane. But beneath it, clear this time, a woman's voice floated through the storm, warm and familiar. "Inside, children, you'll catch your death in this rain." Mary's breath caught. The tone was unmistakable, gentle, firm, filled with that ageless patience only a teacher could have. Ruth. Her pulse quickened. She turned toward the door, drawn by instinct. The golden light outside room 6 had been steady for months, constant, unwavering. But now, from under her door, it wavered, faint, flickering, as if struggling to hold on. Lightning split the sky, flooding the hallway in pale blue light. For the briefest moment she saw movement. Shadows of small figures darting past the frosted window at the end of the hall. The laughter came again, closer this time, like echoes chasing themselves in circles. Mary stepped into the hallway. The air was heavy, charged, almost humming with invisible energy. The walls creaked softly as though breathing. Room 6's door stood half open, and the light spilling out of it pulsed violently. Bright, dim, bright again, fighting against the darkness. "Ruth?" Mary called out, her voice barely audible above the roar of rain. "Are you here?" No answer. Only the distant thunder, rolling endlessly. She edged closer. Every instinct told her to retreat, to shut the door, to hide under her covers until morning. But she couldn't. Not now. Not when she'd come this far. Not when she felt, more than ever, that something was ending. As she reached the doorway, a powerful crack of thunder split the air. The house shuddered. The light in room 6 flared one last time, so bright it painted everything gold. And in that flash, she saw her. Ruth stood in front of the desk, facing the window, her back to Mary. The same silhouette she'd dreamed of. Hair tied neatly, a shawl draped over her shoulders. The glow surrounded her like a halo, rippling softly with every breath. Mary opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Ruth lifted her head slightly, as though listening to voices only she could hear. Faint laughter outside, the sound of invisible children playing in the rain. Then the lamp flickered again. The golden light faltered, dimmed, and went out. The hallway plunged into darkness. Mary gasped, stumbling forward. "Ruth!" But there was no one in the room. Only the soft smell of lavender, and the faint outline of a rocking chair swaying back and forth slowly, as if saying goodbye. Outside, thunder rumbled on, but beneath its roar came something else. A sound gentle and unmistakable. Children laughing, fading into the distance. The storm had softened by dawn. Rain still fell, but no longer in fury. It whispered now, tapping gently against the windows like a tired apology. The thunder rolled far away, a fading echo across the Portland hills. Mary stood in the hallway, barefoot, her nightgown brushing against the old wooden floorboards. The air still held the faint scent of ozone and lavender. Room 6's door was slightly ajar, a quiet invitation. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. The light that had once poured from the crack beneath the door, that soft golden glow that had watched over her nights, her grief, her loneliness, was gone. What remained was only a dull, gray stillness. She pressed her palm gently to the door, feeling its faint warmth. "Ruth?" she whispered. No answer. Only the rain. Pushing the door open, she stepped inside. The room looked smaller than she remembered, almost fragile in the morning light. The old desk sat by the window, perfectly neat, the half-finished letter gone. The chair that had once rocked on its own was still now, legs resting evenly on the floor, and there, in the center of the desk, sat a single teacup. Steam rose softly from it, curling in delicate ribbons toward the ceiling. It was Ruth's cup, the old porcelain one with the faint blue rim. Mary approached it slowly, her throat tightening. The warmth from the cup brushed her fingertips like the ghost of a touch. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice trembling but steady. "For staying with me, for helping me remember how to be still again." Outside, the rain thinned to mist. A faint shaft of sunlight broke through the gray sky, spilling through the window in muted gold. For a fleeting moment it caught the rim of the teacup, and the steam shimmered, glowing softly as if returning the light's embrace. She could almost hear Ruth's voice in the hush that followed. "You were never alone, Mary. You were only waiting to see the light in yourself." Mary smiled faintly, her tears gentle this time. Not from sorrow, but release. She set her hand on the desk, letting her fingers trace the grain of the wood. "Goodbye, Ruth," she whispered. "You can rest now." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, faintly, like a sigh, the teacup rattled once against its saucer. A single drop of tea slipped over the edge and landed on the wood below, darkening it. And the lamp in the corner, the one that had burned for 2 decades without fail, flickered once, then again, and went out. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything the light had meant. Warmth, safety, memory. Mary stood there, bathed in the gentle gray light of morning, her reflection faint in the window. For the first time, it didn't linger. It moved in perfect unison with her. She closed the door behind her softly, her fingers brushing the brass knob one last time. The wood gave a soft creak, like the sigh of an old friend finally at peace. As she walked down the hallway, she passed the spot where the golden light had once spilled out each night, now only a shadow. Yet even without it, she felt something deeper glowing inside her. That night, when she went to bed, the house was completely dark for the first time since she'd arrived, and still, she slept soundly. No whispers, no flickering lights, only the soft rhythm of rain against the cedar roof, and the lingering warmth of a promise kept. The storm had raged through the night, leaving the world trembling in its wake. Rain still clung to the window panes like teardrops reluctant to fall, and the air was thick with that damp metallic scent that follows lightning. Mary sat by the window, wrapped in Ruth's old shawl, the one she'd found tucked inside the armoire weeks ago. The silence after the thunder felt strange, like the whole world was holding its breath. The power flickered back to life with a faint hum. The refrigerator buzzed. The old clock in the hallway began ticking again, stubborn and steady, but the bulb in room 6, her ritual light, remained dark. Mary stood and crossed the room slowly, her bare feet brushing across the cool floorboards. She reached up, twisted the switch, and nothing. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of memory, of presence, of quiet understanding. Mary turned toward the window, and that's when she saw it. Outside, the dawn was breaking through the remnants of the storm, the sky painted in soft hues of rose and gold. But what caught her breath wasn't the sunrise, It was the light. Her window glowed softly, with that same warm amber radiance that had once filled room 6. It wasn't electricity. It wasn't sunlight. It was something gentler, something that felt alive. Mary pressed her palm against the glass. It was warm. And then she understood. Ruth hadn't gone. Not really. She had simply moved on. To where she was meant to be. To the light. To the peace she had been waiting for. But she hadn't left Mary behind. She had left a trace. A reminder. A comfort. A spark of companionship to fill the spaces that loneliness once haunted. Tears blurred Mary's vision, but she smiled through them. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. The air felt lighter, like the house itself exhaled with her. She went to the kitchen, poured herself a cup of tea, and sat in Ruth's favorite chair by the window. The teacup Ruth had left behind, the one that had still been warm the night before, was now cool and empty. Mary placed it beside hers. "2 cups," she murmured softly. "Like always." Outside, the world shimmered with renewal. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the street below, and the scent of wet earth filled the air. The storm had washed everything clean, and the morning sun began to stretch its fingers across the hills. Mary thought of the letter she'd written, the one addressed to the next woman who feels forgotten. She folded it carefully, placed it inside the old desk drawer, and smiled. Someday, she thought, someone might find it. Someone standing in the same shadow she once stood in. And maybe, like her, they'd find a light waiting quietly in the dark. As she sipped her tea, the window continued to glow. It wasn't as bright as before, just a gentle pulse, like the rhythm of a heart. But it was enough. Enough to remind her that loneliness could be transformed, that endings could be beginnings in disguise. Mary leaned back, letting the sunlight brush her face, and felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from being whole. The light in the window flickered once more, softly, almost playfully, before settling into a steady, golden hum. Mary smiled again. "Goodbye, Ruth," she said. "And good morning." Outside, the dawn fully bloomed, spilling light across the valley. Inside, Mary closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling warmth on her skin, in her heart. And somewhere, beyond the veil of what she could see, a quiet voice seemed to whisper back, "You're not forgotten." And for the first time in a long while, Mary truly believed it. The morning after the storm, the world felt reborn. The air was crisp and clean, the kind of freshness that only follows chaos. Puddles shimmered in the early light, and the faint smell of pine and wet earth drifted through the open window. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't ache. It hummed, alive with quiet gratitude. Mary stood on the porch, her hands wrapped around a mug of steaming tea. The roof still glistened from the rain, and the gutters dripped in gentle rhythm. Across the street, Mrs. Helen was sweeping her walkway, her usual scarf tied tightly beneath her chin. She spotted Mary and waved. "Morning, dear. Power's finally back, thank heavens," she called, her voice still hoarse from the night's shouting over thunder. Mary smiled faintly. "Yes, I noticed, though my light's still off." Mrs. Helen hesitated, her broom pausing mid-air. "Ah, yes. I heard that one flickered awful last night. Poor thing. That old bulb must have had enough of our storms." There was something in her tone, a cautious sympathy, like she understood there was more to the story than electricity and wires. She leaned on her broom and lowered her voice. "Strangest thing, though. Some folks said they saw a glow near your window around dawn. Not from the streetlights either. A soft gold, like candlelight." Mary didn't answer. She just looked toward the window of room 6, where a faint reflection of the sunrise gleamed against the glass. Mrs. Helen smiled gently, You helped her rest, you know. Mary blinked. Helped? Who? Ruth, Helen said softly, as though the name itself deserved reverence. That poor woman was part of this place for longer than anyone realized. She used to talk to me sometimes, years ago, before she stopped. Mary felt a slow warmth spread through her chest. Not surprise, not fear, but something like recognition. She was kind, Helen continued. But she couldn't let go. This house kept her tethered. Memories, regrets, I suppose. She always said she was waiting for someone to finish the conversation. Helen's eyes glistened in the morning light. Maybe that someone was you. The words settled in Mary like sunlight through dust. She thought of the teacup that had steamed on its own, of the laughter echoing through thunder, of the warmth that had filled her room when the storm raged at its fiercest, and of the letter she had written to the next woman who feels forgotten. Mary smiled faintly. If I did help her rest, she said, then she helped me too. Helen nodded, her expression soft with knowing. Funny thing about light, it never really disappears. It just finds new ways to shine. For a while they stood there together, watching the neighborhood wake. Children darted around puddles, chasing each other with sticks. A dog barked joyfully at its reflection. The mundane rhythm of life had returned, yet everything felt slightly altered, as if the world had been scrubbed clean of something heavy. Helen eventually straightened up, tightening her scarf. Well, I should finish this before the next rain. But, Mary... She paused. If you ever feel lonely again, my kettle's always on. Though I reckon you won't be quite as lonely anymore. Mary chuckled softly. Thank you, Helen. When Helen disappeared around the corner, Mary turned back toward the window. The morning light fell across the sill, golden and steady. She reached out to touch it, and the warmth beneath her fingertips felt oddly familiar, like an old friend's hand resting atop hers. Inside, the air seemed to hum with quiet energy. The floorboards creaked, not from weight, but from life. The whole house seemed lighter now, freer. Mary took a long sip of her tea, gazing toward the hills where the sun had fully risen. The storm had passed. The darkness had done its work. And now, all that remained was peace. Somewhere deep inside her, a voice she couldn't name whispered gently, "You are never alone in the light." And Mary believed it. The days that followed felt different, quieter, but not in the hollow way they once had. The quiet now had texture, warmth. It carried the echo of purpose. Mary began spending more time outside her small apartment, walking past the park where the elm trees leaned over the benches like listening giants. She passed the old library each morning, its chipped columns glowing gold in the sunrise. It was there, on a community bulletin board just inside the entrance, that she saw it. Volunteers needed. Adult literacy center. Evening tutors welcome. The words seemed to shimmer against the paper. For a moment she swore she saw a faint light reflecting from it, the same amber tone that once glowed through room 6. That evening, Mary found herself at the small literacy center on Pine Street. The building was humble. Mismatched chairs, flickering lamps, and walls lined with used books. Yet when she walked in, she felt an immediate sense of belonging. A woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a clipboard, greeted her. "You must be Mary. Thank you for coming." Mary smiled. "I'm not sure how much help I'll be, but I used to teach a long time ago." "That's more than enough," the woman said warmly. "We need hearts, not resumes." The first class was small, 5 adults, all nervous and fidgeting with pencils like children. Some hadn't held a book in years. When Mary began reading aloud, her voice trembled at first. But as she looked up and saw their eyes following every word, something inside her steadied. The fear of insignificance, the ache that had followed her for so long, began to fade. Each night, she taught them a little more. Simple stories at first, then poems, letters, essays. The students started to linger after class, talking to her about their days. They laughed when she brewed tea during lessons, calling it the teacher's fuel. And slowly, the classroom began to take on a familiar warmth. The soft hum of connection filled the air. The old lamps glowed brighter than they should have. Sometimes, during the quiet moments between lessons, Mary thought she heard a faint page turning in the back of the room, though no one was there. One night, a young mother named Carla lingered after everyone else had gone. She looked around the classroom and smiled shyly. "It feels nice in here," she said. "Peaceful, like someone's watching over us." Mary paused mid-step, her heart fluttering. "Does it?" Carla nodded. "Yeah. I don't know. It's silly, but it feels like kindness lives here." Mary smiled softly. "It's not silly at all." When Carla left, Mary walked to the front of the classroom and looked at the blackboard. The last line of the day's reading still lingered in chalk. "Every light that fades leaves room for another to rise." She set down her chalk and turned off the lamps, one by one, except the smallest one on her desk. It flickered for a moment, then steadied. For a brief second, she saw a reflection in the window. A woman sitting at a desk beside her, hair pinned neatly, marking papers with calm focus. Ruth Carver. But when Mary blinked, she was gone. Still, the air smelled faintly of lavender and chalk dust. She whispered, "Thank you." From that night on, teaching became more than a pastime. It became her calling. Each lesson was a thread connecting her to something greater, a continuation of a kindness that refused to fade. The students grew, the classes filled, and laughter returned to the old building. And sometimes, when Mary locked up for the night, she'd glance back and see the faintest glimmer of golden light inside the darkened room, as though someone, somewhere, was still keeping the lamp lit. The months passed softly, like pages turning in an old, beloved book. Portland's autumn had returned, rain tracing slow silver lines down car windows, the scent of cedar and wet leaves filling the air once more. Mary's life had found its rhythm again, classes in the evening, long walks in the park, quiet tea at her window. The ache of loneliness that once shadowed her days had melted into something gentler, a memory, a companion, a reminder of how far she had come. One Friday night, after closing up the literacy center, Mary decided to take the long route home. She turned down Birchwood Avenue, the street she hadn't visited since she left the boarding house. The rain had just begun, tapping softly on her windshield. Streetlights reflected golden ripples on the wet pavement. Her hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel as she passed the old maple trees, the cracked sidewalk, the familiar iron gate. And there it was. The boarding house stood quietly under the drizzle, just as she remembered. The cedar roof damp, the porch sagging slightly, the old curtains still swaying behind fogged glass. She slowed the car and parked by the curb, the wipers sweeping rhythmically. For a long moment she simply sat there, watching the second-floor window. Room 6. It was dark. The sight brought a small ache to her chest. Not sadness exactly, but a kind of tender nostalgia. The room that once glowed so warmly, that had kept her company through the darkest nights, was finally still. She took a deep breath and smiled. Then, just as she reached for the ignition, the light flickered. Once. Golden, gentle, familiar. The softest pulse of warmth shone through the rain, illuminating the curtains in that unmistakable amber hue. It lingered for a few heartbeats, enough for her to feel it, not just see it, before fading into darkness once more. Tears welled in Mary's eyes. She didn't wipe them away, wipe them. Instead, she whispered into the quiet, "Good night, Ruth." Her voice trembled but carried through the stillness, as if the rain itself paused to listen. A single drop rolled down the glass, catching the reflection of the streetlight. And for an instant, it looked like the glow of a lamp, alive again. She smiled through her tears, heart full and steady. When she finally drove away, the world seemed softer somehow, the rain more musical, the streets more forgiving. She felt as though the city itself was breathing in rhythm with her, whispering stories of kindness that refused to die. And somewhere behind her, in that quiet boarding house, perhaps a presence smiled too, proud, peaceful, ready to rest.